So tonight we're just going to talk about some front end stuff, namely Vue composition API. How TypeScript kind of comes into play and how to use that. V-test and unit testing on the front end. I Jerry asked me to do this today, so my preparation has been a few hours today. So it's going to be very freeform, and if you have any questions, jump in and we can talk about whatever your specific question is. But my idea was I was just going to kind of make a mock like scriptless page. That's very relevant, obviously, to bug wars. It's just like basic asynchronous state kind of stuff, and yeah. So I put together a little thing we'll go through, and so I have here just a basic npm create Vue at latest project, which I've removed some of the boilerplate from, or some of the starting code from, and set up the folder structure that I typically use. So I just wanted to kind of go over that first, just to maybe give you some ideas about how to organize things. So I always create, so the components folder they give you, what I like to do is I like to create subfolders for different features. So for example, I might create a base folder for all of the components that might be used like anywhere in your app. So if you're like, for example, if you make a button component, that you're going to use everywhere, that would go in the base. If you make like a modal or something, that could go in the base folder. And then, you would have different folders for different features. So if you have a game page, a script page, you might make these folders correspond to your views. Like each view would have a folder up here in the components. It's just a nice way of keeping everything tidy, so you're not digging through a whole huge list of components every time you want to find something. Then I always have a folder for composables. So we'll go into those a bit later, more into detail. But for now, I'll just show you the folder. Obviously, the router. Services, this follows kind of what we've been doing in the boot camp that we just graduated. Tuck Elevator, that's the one. So yeah, we had our script service, so I just kind of kept that. Stores would be any Pina stores you have. Types, I always have a main index.ts file, and this will just house any types that are used throughout the whole app. You could also declare types closer to where they're used. Typically, if they're only used in one file, I'll just declare them there and then not export them. Or if they're used in maybe like two different files, I'll maybe just export them from one of those relevant files. It's really up to you how you want to organize that. And then utils would be any sort of functions or utility things that aren't, for me, it isn't state related. So I'll try and maybe I'll go into a little detail on that, a little preview right now. So regarding state, there are, I guess, 3 different types of things, I'll say. So there are, on the bottom end, like a function, a stateless function, right? So that's something that is going to take in some arguments and then return data. It's not reliant on any state. It just it's like a pure function. It just takes in some stuff and gives you back some stuff. And then when you get into stateful stuff, now you're talking about maybe a composable, which is state for maybe a single component, or that can be used in multiple components. But every time you use that composable, you're getting a fresh instance, which is in contrast to a store. A store is basically the same thing as a composable, except it is a singleton, which means that whenever you use that store, you're getting the same store. You're not instantiating a new store, which is why you can use, if you have an auth store, for example, and you use it all across your app, it's the same store that's used all across your app. So, you'll get the same data, and all different sorts of components can mutate that data, and they'll all be in sync. So there's different use cases for composables and stores. So maybe that's okay. So that's fine. So what I have set up here, let's actually look at code. Is I have.
What can a composable be? Can a composable be like a Vue component, or are you talking about like a JavaScript class? Like what? Or a TypeScript class? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'll show an example of it a little later. Cool. I just kind of wanted to give the preview, I guess. It's easier once we see it.
Cool.
So I just have a standard view here. It's just going to my script menu, which is what I'm going to be building out. That'll be on this demo page. So we'll just go into our components, script menu. And I have some styling it's still going to look garbage, but it'll, it's still going to look bad. So don't get excited. Okay. So first things first, this is, actually, let's look at just like the basic. So first of all, if you don't already have a snippet like this, I can post how to make one of these in the Discord. But basically, I created a few different snippets where you just type SFC and it gives you the boilerplate to create a component. So obviously, the differences here between this and the options API are in the options API, we would just have a normal script tag, and we would, export some. I don't remember if it's default or not. It might be. So we would export, some object and then have all this.
Default.
Yep, have all this stuff in it. The difference with composition API is we use this script setup. So script setup, if you're familiar with the life cycle of a component, so we were using the created life cycle hook in the options API to basically like do stuff when the component was put into memory, instantiated. And then there's also like the mounted, which is when it's actually like put into the DOM. So setup happens before any of those things happen. So it's roughly equivalent to created, but there are some differences. The other interesting change is that we're not in an object. We're not like exporting some object that becomes sort of the state and everything else that has to do with the component. We just type in normal sort of TypeScript looking syntax, and which is what makes it composable. So I do want to say before I go any farther that the Vue documentation is wonderful, and for any sort of Vue thing you're trying to do, if you go there, every page has a little button that you can press, and it'll switch between the options and the composable API or composition API. And so it's really easy, like if you can see like, oh, I'm familiar doing it this way in options, and then you hit the little box, and then it'll show you the equivalent in the composition API. So it's really helpful. Their documentation is wonderful. Highly recommend it.
I would like to add, can you explain to us the difference between the composition API and the options API? Because there's some people here that might not even know Vue, or actually viewers might not know Vue like to the extent that a Tech Elevator student would.
Sure.
So could you please explain that?
So the options API, the idea is we have this this object that we're exporting that is basically all of the state, all of the behavior of this component, and it has all these nice little predefined things. So like if I want to create a method, I would create it in this methods property, and just create all my methods here. If I want to create computed refs, I would create those here. If I want to do emits or props, I would do it like this. So this is nice because it is a sort of bucket style of, hey, I know if I'm going to make a method, I put it with the methods, right? Like it's very organized in that regard. Whatever I want to do, I put it in that place, and that's great. One of the downsides of the options API is once you have a significantly complex component, you end up having different features intermingled. So you might have like 3 different features that all have different methods, and they're all together. And then you might have, again, those same 3 different features might have different computed properties that they're using. So things become grouped by, is it a method, is it a computed, versus like having one feature altogether. It's also, and I don't have much experience with this, but my understanding is that it's quite a bit more difficult if you want to reuse this code in different places, because it's all part of this exported object. So I think from what I've understood is that it's just a bit more of a pain to, reuse sort of component code because it's so tightly coupled to the component. So this is in contrast to, maybe I'll try and show two things at the same time. So again, ignore the styles on the left, right? But this is, so if I was going to have, so let's say I have some data here, like a name, and then I don't know, I'm not gonna like come up with contrived things right now, but we'll just say from the absolute basic thing, this is the equivalent in composition API. So we'll create a ref with that same name. So this is like the same thing. So this is reactive state. And in the template, if I want to print this out, I would use name. If I want to refer to this in some method, I would use this.name, right? If I want to set it to something else. Sorry. Right, so that's how I would access it in the options API. In the composition API, it's exactly the same for using it in the template. The only difference is if I want to set it now, I could have, okay, so now if I really want to make it the same, I could create a function, my method, and I could say, thank you, Copilot. I could say name.value. So value is how we unwrap the reactive object. And here we're using this to refer to sort of the data, the current scope. So it's pretty similar in that regard. You just have to remember you're unpacking with value. And of course, this is really easy to import. So I could have this ref in some other file, and import it. I could
Cool.
In some file have export const name, and then use that in some other file, and that would just be fine. So yeah. So we will now move away from the options API, and you'll notice that is the main difference. A lot of the other names are going to be the same. Some of the lifecycle methods have slightly different names, but otherwise it's very similar. We just kind of invoke them in a different manner. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to create the first thing I'm going to do is, so the idea here is I want to get a list of scripts. I want to display them. And then just for fun, we're going to add the ability to sort them dynamically. And then we'll also create a Pina store, get that, just like get a username from the Pina store.
What's a Pina store?
So Pina, if you're familiar,
you don't have to go into too much detail. You can just like.
Yeah. So Vuex is the previous version of sort of a global store that Vue had. It was Vuex version 4. While they were creating Vuex version 5, they created this offshoot project called Pina that was sort of an experiment as to how they want to do stores, and they enjoyed Pina so much that they made Pina sort of Vuex version 5, if you will.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So it's made by the Vue people. It's a bit of a different API to use, but it's a little less opinionated, a little more freedom. It's really nice. So yeah, we're gonna do that, and then we're gonna write tests, which will show some of the basic things, and we'll also extract all of the code we write here into a composable, which will make it really easy to test, sort of separated from the component.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's get rid of this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sort of a mocks service, because backend stuff is kind of out of the scope of what I'm going to do right here. So what I'm going to do, so this would be, let me uncomment this whole file. So this get scripts would be what your normal service looks like, right? You'd use Axios to get some endpoint. Axios would be pre-configured somewhere, right? Maybe like this with the base URL somewhere. Maybe you create a new Axios instance here. However you go about it, right? This is basically what your service is going to look like. And this will return a promise, which wraps an Axios response. So for the purposes of this demo, we're just going to use this this get scripts, which always just returns the same response. So it's going
Cool.
to mimic a script service.
So for people that didn't catch this, like you don't, if somebody's working on the back end, right? Like let's say you're working on a story and the backend endpoint hasn't been created yet, and this method called get scripts is supposed to call the backend. The way Chris has set it up here is he set it up so that it doesn't even, it just sends back dummy data. So it's simulating a call to the backend, but it's actually returning dummy data, which is pretty cool. Like this is the type of code you want to take snapshots of. It's very helpful. Sorry, Chris, continue.
Yeah, no, you're fine. So in here, basically, I'm going to, in preparation for receiving that data, I'm going to create a variable called scripts, which will eventually hold, whatever we receive from that script service call. And we have Copilot being very helpful. So it already knows, because I've already written this code somewhere else, that's, all right, let's break this down, actually. So we know ref refers to a reactive variable. So this is how you store reactive state in Vue. And it's a wrapper around whatever you want to store. So we're going to store an array, which will eventually hold scripts. But we're working in TypeScript. So TypeScript is pretty good. If I do something like, I don't know, is true, terrible example, right? Or, is Boolean, we'll do that. So if I put a ref with some initial value, TypeScript is really good about inferring what type is Boolean is going to be. So you can see here that is Boolean is a ref of type Boolean. So it's a reactive data that wraps a Boolean. And similarly, if I do it with a string, it'll know it's a string. Now with an array, though, it gives a never. It's never typed. So you have to give it a little help so it knows that, hey, this array should actually contain scripts. Well, what is a script? TypeScript doesn't know what a script is, so let's tell it what a script is. So in our examples here, this is what a script is going to look like. It's going to have an ID, it's going to have a name, and it's going to have a body. Your script and your code obviously might look different. So what we'll do is we'll create a type, and I'm going to call it script with a capital S.
Cool.
And then I will declare it as something that is kind of like an object. But what we'll do is we'll give each key a type. So I know the ID is going to be a number. The name will be a string. And the body will also be a string. And we use semicolons for each of the keys.
Can you use class as the keyword instead of type? Have you seen that in any of the examples, or is that like a Vue thing?
Use interface.
You can use interface, but there's no class that you can use. Okay.
No, there's no class. Right. So this is our TypeScript. So I'm going to export this so that my other files have access to this.
Nice.
And now here, so this is okay. So ref is what's called a generic function, which means it can take all sorts of arguments, and it will wrap them, as reactive data. But because it can't infer what this argument is, because it doesn't know what type is going to be in this array, we can tell it what it should return. So we can tell it that it's going to return a script, and because I just made that, I don't think it's going to give me the auto import. So I will say import type script from types. So now I can tell it this is going to be an array of scripts. And now nice. I can mouse over script, and it'll tell me exactly what, it's an array of a script, which we know has an ID, a name, and a body. So this is one of the reasons I just love TypeScript, because I can be anywhere in my code, and I can mouse over something, and it'll tell me exactly what belongs in that thing.
What if you do scripts.value equals 4? Yeah, cool. Show that.
Sure. So Sweet. It's going to say, number is not assignable to type scripts array. And then this will also give me all the autocomplete. So I can say script.value, of some entry, and it'll give me all of the properties.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is just so handy.
Heck yeah.
And the beautiful thing is, like Jerry pointed out, if you try to assign something invalid, you'll know right away. It'll scream at you right away, which is great. Or if you let's say you're using scripts all over your app, and you decide later on to, oh well, now the script needs to have some Boolean, right? So now when I add that, if I have any code that uses the script or instantiates a script that doesn't have the Boolean, it'll scream at me. Like it won't compile the whole thing, and I'll know all the instances or all the places I need to change my code, which is really, really valuable. Okay, so we've prepared our scripts sort of variable. So let's create a function that will get the scripts. So this is going to be an async function, and we're going to call it getScripts. So async await. So we're going to go over a whole bunch of new stuff right now. So let's actually, so that the classic way of doing this would be to do something like script service. Are you going to autocomplete for me? Imports script service. Okay. So this would be like the classic way of doing it, right? Let's see what it doesn't like about that. So the following properties. So it doesn't know that the data is going to be, let's see here.
Oh yeah, because you have any.
Yeah. So how do we type this? You can say data is going to be in a script array. Maybe it'll be okay with that.
I think you got to do it inside of the getScripts method. You're going to have to return. Where is it? Oh, can you do? Oh, you're doing a promise Axios response. I've never done it that way. What's the any? Like, what is that? What are those supposed to be? Is that like the like a request, or what is that supposed to be?
I don't know. I assume one of them is the. Well, we can try.
Can you put it on both? Oh, data is access response script.
Oops. Yeah.
Oh, can you do data dot response, or can you control Z that again and do data dot?
It's because it's this.
Okay, cool.
Copilot threw me under the bus there. Okay. I was like, I've never seen that before. Okay. All right. So cool. we're back on track. So right. So this is the traditional way we've been doing it in Tech Elevator. A bit of a more modern way to do it is to use what's called async await, which just makes the code a little cleaner. The downside of doing this is that everything that chains after this call needs to be inside this callback, which can get kind of weird in certain places, because then you sort of get into what I've heard referred to as callback hell, where you're just passing callback upon callback, to be executed. It gets kind of messy. So if you do async, if you make this an async function, what you can do is you can just await. So we can say const response equals await this, and this is this will become the equivalent. And you can see it reads much more like normal JavaScript. And basically what will happen is this line won't execute until this line resolves or rejects. And so I guess we can also say if response.status equals 200, we'll do this. I will mention that you should probably do more substantial error checking when you actually do this, but this is an example. So this is all we're doing. Okay, so now we have an async function, getScripts, and we want that to be called onPageLoad. So what I can do is instead of putting this in, normally, if we were in options API, I'd put this in the created lifecycle function. But like I said, script setup actually executes before that. So I can actually just call this inside
cool.
my script setup.
So it reads it top down and it executes everything immediately.
Yep, correct.
Cool.
Okay, so this should be enough to actually print out some scripts. So I'm going to copy and paste some stuff here. Where are we? Okay, so this is just a v-for loop. We're just going for every script in scripts. We'll assign the key to be the script ID, and then we'll print out the script name. So if I save here, I will get all of the names in my, predefined array of scripts here. Wonderful, magic. Okay, so we're not stopping here. We're going to do a few more things. What I would like to do is add a button that will allow me to sort these scripts alphabetically by title.
Awesome.
So we're going to have to do a few things to make that happen. The first thing is I want to be able to sort in either direction. Oh, it knows me. So it's because I have a file I'm looking at on the other computer, so it's aware.
Oh, cool.
So I'm going to create a new. By the way, yeah, if anyone has any questions about what we've done so far, feel free to jump in. I'm just going to throw stuff at you, and hopefully some of it's valuable. So, right, so we're just going to create a Boolean to hold, whether or not we're sorting ascending. And then I will actually create a computed ref, and we'll call this sorted scripts.
I'm glad that you're putting like all sorts of different examples of things here. This is great.
That was my goal.
So computed has to be defined like this with like this anonymous function.
Yep.
Cool.
So whatever we return in here, so we could return true. Obviously, this won't do anything, but whatever we return here will be the value of sorted scripts. And
cool.
if we do something like this, of course, it should be value. Whenever sort, right, just like computed options, whenever this changes, this becomes a
it automatically it'll trigger the execution of the event or
exactly,
yeah.
The computed will update whenever sort ascending changes. So
awesome.
What we can do here is we can say dot value. So the reason I'm doing this, and this is actually what I want, except I'm going to make it a little cleaner. Okay. So a few things. We need to return an array, but we can't, if we do this, you'll see it's very unhappy with me because .sort sorts this array in place. And so all of a sudden we're returning actually this array, but sorted, and it doesn't like that. The other option would be to use .sorted. The problem is that TypeScript, you have to change the TypeScript config to actually allow you to use .sorted, and like it's like a newer feature, I guess, in the TypeScript library. So the easy way around this is to use the spread operator on scripts.value. So we get all the values, and then we put it into a new array. That way, this array is a different array than actually scripts.value, but it has the same values. And then we'll sort it. So to sort it, we're going to give our own sorting method, which will just basically take.
So in Java, it's a comparator.
Yeah.
So the guy,
Yeah. So here, we're going to give it the sort direction, which is going to be based on our Boolean sort ascending. And if sort ascending is true, we'll give it a 1. And if not, we'll give it a -1, which will basically just, because if we return -1 here, then we know that A minus B. So we know that A is less than B. And if we turn +1, we know that A is greater than B. So by comparing A and B lexicographically, we will get a -1, 0, or 1. And then we can invert it if we want to change the sort direction. So another way to do this would be to do a.name.local compare b.name, or b.name.local, just like switch the order of this would be another way to change the direction, but I think this is a little nicer. Anyways, so this is basically just sorting the scripts based on which sort direction we have. And I will create a function called toggle sort direction. We could do this inline on our button, but I think it's a little cleaner if we do it in a function, especially when we sort of eventually put all this into a composable. It'll just be a lot cleaner. So now I'm going to pop in my button. So the button is just basically when you click it, it's going to toggle the sort direction, which is just going to invert. So if it's false, it'll switch sort ascending to true and vice versa. And then it'll show a
up or down. Cool.
Right. So whenever I click it, it's changing the sort ascending. And the scripts are sorting, although we can't see it yet because we haven't hooked it up. So all we have to do to hook that up is change this to sorted scripts. And now if I hit save, you see the scripts actually just sorted themselves. So now I can click the button and the scripts sort. Cool.
Awesome.
I'm going to add this container.
Where's my clap button? Can somebody play it for me, please? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so this will just put it in the center of the screen. Okay. And then let's see what else we got here. Oh, I think I put this button originally. There. Cool.
Nice.
Okay, so let's talk about Pina a little bit. So what I would like to have happen is up here, I would like to basically greet the currently logged in user. This is a bit of a contrived example, but I want to show you how Pina testing works, so that's why I'm injecting Pina into the conversation now. So we're going to go over to our stores, and we will create a Pina store. And so a Pina store is going to be very similar to a composable, and I'll go over that now. So a store or a composable both have they basically have all the same things you could have in the setup, the script setup of a component. So we could have state, like for example, user. We could have, if we wanted, like a login method that would log the user in. So this would, maybe call your auth service.login or whatever, and pass along a name and password, and what have you. And then we could expose that to whoever uses this. It could have a logout. It could, all the sorts of things that are associated with auth could be encapsulated in this store. For now, it's bare bones because it's a simple example, and I didn't feel like making all that stuff work. So all I have right here is just a user, a hard-coded value that we're going to return and expose to whoever consumes this store. Now, we have not defined a user type, so for practice, I will come back to our types, and I will create a type for my user. And it looks like we're going to have an ID again. We will have a name, and we will have an email. Okay. So now that we have that user, we're happy again. And now I can mouse over user, and again, it'll show me exactly what a user is. And we've pre-populated a sample user here. Cool. So this is our auth store. So what you'll notice is that we'll have a bunch of stuff here. So this is actually, you'll see this function is like nested, inside the store function. And this is a typical pattern you'll see in composables as well. The idea is then we return everything we want to expose from this store. So we could have a number of functions and whatnot in here that we don't expose that are just sort of helper methods in Java. So in this way, you can only expose what your component or your consumer is going to need to consume, and kind of hide away any logic that you don't want them to know about. or excess. So cool. So let's use our auth store in our script menu. So we can do that using. Oh, and I should mention, because maybe we haven't really talked about this in Tech Elevator, which I for some reason keep forgetting the name of. This is a object shortcut syntax. So this is a functionally equivalent of saying this. So we're returning an object with a key user that holds our user, with a key login that holds our login method or function. So when you have a property or a key that has the same name as the variable you're putting as its value, JavaScript allows you to shorten that to just the variable name, and it'll package this as what I just showed you. So that's important to understand there. And similarly, we can destructure that object. You'll see this pattern a lot. So we can import our auth store. And now we can destructure.
Is that a user auth store or use auth store?
Use auth store.
Is there a particular reason why it's named that way? Like, is that best practice or?
It's a convention, yeah. So
that's a convention. Okay.
All your stores will be named use auth or use, your store.
Yeah, gotcha.
And then composables will just be like use auth.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so that's a convention that started. That's actually stolen from React.
Oh, okay, cool.
React hooks popularized sort of use state, use, all the other use effect, all that stuff. And Vue actually used the hooks as inspiration for their composition API. So that's where that comes from. So yeah. And let's see, are we happy now with this import? Let's see here. I think it just hasn't picked it up yet. But normally this would give you autocomplete. For whatever reason, it's not. Let's see if. Oh, I think it's just not the right path. That's all. Okay. So now I can autocomplete. It'll know, what I have exposed here. So something very important to note about object destructuring with stores. Okay. Well, first let's talk about what is object destructuring. If I have some object. Maybe I have yeah, sure, whatever. Let's do that. I can create a variable called name. Well, I can create all these variables from my object like this. So what this will do is it'll take an object and it will create a variable called name, a variable called age, and a variable called city. And it can do this because these are the same key names that are present in the object. So it's just sort of a shortcut, as opposed to saying something like, const name equals my object.name, right? That would be the equivalent, but verbose. Or you could obviously use my object.name wherever you want to use it. But that's just not how people typically, that's, I guess, the convention is that people just do this. So anyways, so that's what's going on here. Now, it's very important to note is that you can dereference functions, but if you try and dereference a ref, this will actually lose reactivity, which is undesirable. So to dereference a ref, what you can do, and I usually do this.
Wait up. My head's going to explode. You can put reference values inside of the store itself?
Yes.
Okay. And how do you do that? Oh, you did it right now.
Yeah. So the
ref. Oh, you did it right there. I see. Cool.
So basically, the way to think of a store is it's just, well, I was going to say it's a composable, but it's a singleton. But we haven't talked about composables in depth yet. Gotcha. But it's basically like it's the script setup part of a component, but it's a
right. It's the script. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It's the script section of a component, but it's like standalone.
Yeah.
No template, no CSS. It's just okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this can have computer properties and like all that other stuff.
All the stuff. It can have. You can watch variables. You can do lifecycle hooks inside it.
Cool. Wow. Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it would make sense to do it in a store, probably.
Right. But
Anyways,
but still, like it's like you were saying before, how it's more flexible. Like this is definitely giving you more flexibility.
yeah. Of course, at the expense of you need to organize it all now.
Right.
So that is one of the benefits, and I think why Tech Elevator probably teaches using the options API is that where do I put my method? I put it in the method section.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
it's kind of nice for that. So anyways, so the way we keep our reactivity for the user is we use a function called store to refs, which Pina provides. So we can just wrap use auth store in store to refs, and then we can destructure our user.
Gotcha. Cool.
So that's important to remember because I've definitely done this a few times and forgotten store to refs, and then wondering why my data isn't updating in my component. It's that. All right, so we have the user. So all I want to do is basically just print out the user's name as a greeting in our component. So I'm just going to create a heading, and I'm just going to say, these are users scripts. So again, because we're using it in the template, we don't have to say user.value.name. We just say user.name. And I'll save that, and we should have Fred scripts. Okay. I think that was all the stuff I was going to put in this component. So now what I want to talk about is, well, first off, I want to say, imagine if you were to test this component. Okay. Now, there's a bit of a weirdness here because you would use Vue test utils. You'd mount this component, but as soon as you mount the component, Git scripts will fire. So this is going to call, attempt to call some backend somewhere. So that's a little annoying because every test, no matter, even if you're testing something that isn't Git scripts, you're still going to have to mock the script service in every test.
Yes.
So that's a little annoying. It's difficult to pick out different things you might want to test. Because you're going to have to test them all as side effects of interacting with the component. Now, some things you can do that pretty well with Vue test utils. You can click a button, fine. You can do stuff like that. But if it starts getting more complex than that, it's very annoying to test. And Sam and some other people in my group will know this from experience because we've tried. You try to test stuff in components, and it's just a pain. So
yes, it is.
The way to solve this problem, and I'm gonna get away from our demo for just a second so I can have two screens or two halves of a screen, is we're going to separate the functionality of our component into a composable. So I'm going to create a composable, and I'm going to call it use script menu. Okay. So this is going to be basically all of the behavior and state of our script menu in this nice little composable. Now, I do want to say that in this case, again, this is a simplified example. Typically, the more complex your components get, you could actually break this. If you have a few different features here, you could break this into multiple composables, and then like maybe pull them all into use script menu and then expose them to the component. So that's the beauty of composables is you can break it into smaller and smaller pieces so that it still makes sense as a whole without getting crazy complex.
Nice.
So the easiest way to do this refactor is, first off, I'm going to export a function which I'm going to name the same as the file. So export function use script menu singular. And then I'm just going to take my code here and I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to resolve my imports.
Okay. So you're just moving, you're putting it into a new composable so that you can write tests for it much more easily.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So this will allow us to just test our use script menu, right? And then the component will still use it.
Yeah.
So what I'll do now is I will delete all these references. And if you're
nice.
Not quite as adventurous as me, you can do it, piece by piece and make sure everything kind of works. But this isn't too complicated. So I'll delete all those references, and then this is a really easy way to see what we need to expose, because we might not need to expose everything in here to our component, right?
Gotcha.
So we have our user. We definitely need to expose the user. So you'll notice that this is very much the same as Pina, where I'm going to return an object, which will contain all the things I want to expose to whoever consumes this. So it looks like we have a toggle sort direction. So I'm just looking at what's redlined on this document, and those are what I know I need to return. sort ascending.
Wow. So
Sorted
you can
script.
put your computer property in there. You're going to put your method, like all that stuff just
Yep.
goes in and you just expose it. It's pretty
Yep.
cool.
So now I'll save this. And now I can say use script menu. And again, as if you just create the file, unfortunately, VS Code doesn't like help you with the import.
Gotcha.
If it already existed, it would help you. So we can just say use script menu. That's funny. It's suggesting add hooks. That's not the right language. All right. So composables,
Okay.
use script menu.
So you do const and you have an empty body and use scripts menu and that will automatically load.
So this will now give us.
Oh, you gotta take out the stuff you need, right?
I still got to give it the stuff, but I do it in this order so that I have the autocomplete. So I can say user,
nice,
toggle sort direction,
cool,
sort ascending, sorted scripts, get scripts. So now everything's happy. So I should be able to look, and I should still have a working component.
Nice.
But now all of my behavior and state is encapsulated in use script menu.
Great.
And this is really nice if you have, you might be using multiple composables in the same. So you could use multiple composables in the same component, or you could have a sort of this use script menu composable and then import multiple composables into this composable. So you can kind of organize your code how you want.
Right, you can build on it.
Yeah.
Add more.
But the great part about this is the component again only has access to the things it needs.
Yeah.
Cool. So now that we have the use script menu, we can write some tests for it. By the way, just want to make a note. So this @ syntax here, this is a nice little Vite feature that is basically like a pseudo, what's the word I'm looking for? Relative, absolute. It's just like a pseudo absolute path. So this is very much like saying /source/composables. But we can't say /source/composables because wherever Vite bundles this might have a different, the path might be different. So what we can do is we can define, wrong file. It's tsconfig. It's one of these. Sorry, tsconfig.app.json. And so we can define an alias, a path alias here. And so that's what's doing here. And this prevents us from having a situation where we're somewhere else and we have this sort of stuff going on.
Right.
So just wanted to point that out for people who might not have known what that means. Okay.
Cool.
So yeah, you'll see that I'm using that everywhere. It cleans up the imports. Okay. So now we're going to write a test, some tests. So again, there are multiple sort of paradigms for where people put their tests. Some people like to have a single test folder somewhere and then kind of copy, that I guess that's like the Java way, right? It's like you have a test folder somewhere, you copy the folder structure of this and put all your tests there. I personally like to put my tests directly next to the things that they're testing.
Yep.
This is a pattern I've seen online, and I really like it because I can immediately go through folders and see what doesn't have tests yet.
Exactly.
I think that's really nice. Okay.
So the UI typically has it like that. Java has it the other way. It's just weird that convention works out that way, but
yeah,
for exactly the way you said, it's very nice because you can just see what has tests, what doesn't have tests. It's all right there.
Yeah. So we will create. All right, let me open this up on the other screen just so I don't say something dumb. Okay, so tests. We're gonna. This is front end, like back end testing is so much nicer than front end testing. I'll lead with that because back end testing, like people have built a million different APIs. There's a generalized structure for it. Typically your API is going to have a controller, a service, repositories and stuff. The testing framework, people test the same way, but your behavior is different, obviously. But like the testing kind of all generally looks the same. Front end is the Wild West because there's just so many different things that will dictate how your app behaves, and it's a mess. So you have to be patient with front end testing until you kind of get comfortable with it because it's it's been a journey. I'll tell you that, figuring this stuff out. Okay.
Yeah, and that's
So,
and Chris, just this is why it's so difficult. That's why you are teaching this, because like in a day, me going through it, like there's no way I would be able to even like I could teach like Jasmine coding for Angular, but like you were saying, it's the wild wild west. I can't even my stuff might not even transfer over to this field. So I'm very appreciative for what you're doing here. This is awesome. I'm learning from this as well.
So I do want to mention, thank you. I do want to mention that, so we're using vtest, which is a wrapper around Jest, which is a popular JavaScript testing framework. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that, because if you Google stuff and you find Jest answers, you can pretty much use those answers. You'll just change Jest for vtest or V,
Awesome.
or VI in some cases.
Cool. Good to know.
So we'll start by using describe. And again, for whatever reason, the first test, it doesn't like to import it. So I'm going to steal that. So it's from vtest. So we're going to import describe from vtest. For whatever reason, once you get the first one in, it knows.
Nice.
So the typical syntax is for describe, you are like, this is the folder that the rest of these tests fall under, or the category of the tests.
Mm-hmm.
So when the tests run, it'll say, use script menu tests, and then it'll show all the test names. So this is just a way of organizing it. So usually you'll describe it by the name of what you're testing. Or if it's a component, maybe you use my component.vue as the name, just cool. So people know what file you're using. And then you can use either test or it. These are aliases or they're equivalent. So it just depends on people like it because it's kind of like normal grammar. So we could say what are we going to test here? We could say, well, it should fetch scripts. We know it should fetch scripts.
Yes.
So that's going to be the first thing we test. And so each of these is, the first argument is a label, a string is a label, and then the second argument is an anonymous function, which just kind of holds stuff. So for the describe, it holds all of the children tests, and for it, or a test, it holds the actual test itself. Okay, so here's where we get into, the adventure begins here. So I always like to have my test on one pane and what I'm testing on the other. So the first thing we're going to test is I want to say I'm going to call the function getScripts, and I expect that scripts.value will be updated to whatever the response is. So how do I'm going to start maybe not in order, but I just want to start like this so I can show you how I decide what I need to mock or what direction I need to head in. So first I'm going to say, well, how do I access the things I'm testing? So the first thing I need to do is to, just like in the component, I'm going to import use script menu. And then I'll expose all of the things I need to test whatever I'm testing. So I'm going to test get scripts. So that's exposed directly. So I can get scripts. And then I'm also going to, so get scripts, I'll know it's successful if it updates the scripts.value. So I have scripts here. Now I'm not exposing scripts, but I am exposing sorted scripts. So I can test whether this is set by looking at the value of sorted scripts.
Nice.
So I will take both of those. Now, something I didn't mention before, but you'll notice here is that I am exposing a method and reactive data. And you'll recall that for stores, I said we could not destructure reactive data.
Yeah.
Composables we can. That's just that's just how it is.
What the frick? Oh my gosh.
It's the Pina magic. Pina is doing a lot of extra things over a normal composable.
Okay. Okay. The Pina allows you to do it, but a composable does not allow you to do it.
No. Well, Pina requires you to do an extra step to expose your reactive data.
Okay.
Presumably because.
And the composable doesn't, and because this is the composable,
Yeah,
Pinya
composable,
is,
you can just,
okay.
yeah, intuitively, the composable is a bit more intuitive. You just
Gotcha.
expect, hey, I can just, get the stuff in my return object, Okay, so we have,
Okay, got to remember that.
yeah, it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I know that I'm going to call get scripts, and I'm going to need to await it because it is an asynchronous function.
Cool.
And if I don't await it, then what's going to happen is I'm going to call it, and then I'm going to expect something, but this will not
This is
no
great.
longer
Can you
be.
do that? Can you do that real quick and show what happens? Because
Oh
this is
yeah, well,
this is actually a big issue in enterprise programming. People don't realize that they're calling an async method
yeah.
and they run a test. This is also why you have to make sure that the test fails first, and then you make it pass. Because this is basically the reason why you want to do that, because of this type of test. This is great, man.
This is how we can test. So we're going to see a few things fail here, actually, if I just run this.
Okay.
So that'll be good. we'll work in the direction of getting it working.
Nice.
So this is the first just basic test I'm going to be. Oh, well, I should actually create some test data first. Sorry. Yoink. So here is just a few test scripts that I created. Just
wait. I'm sorry. Hold on. It's not going to call the other dummy data that you had. It's not going to try to do an actual call for the dummy data.
Right now, it will.
Okay.
So maybe we'll do that for now.
Not okay. Right. Okay. So you're using your production quote unquote service now. When you run it, it's going to try to make a call to the backend, but in actuality, it's actually going to call that dummy data you have loaded in there. But
Correct.
as soon as you actually make that call to the backend, or as soon as you wire the code to call the backend, when you run this test, it's going to actually call the backend, which is a bad thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want that.
So first we can just do this test as is.
Okay.
Because you're absolutely right. Right now it's not a problem because we're doing dummy data, but I will do the mocking.
Yes, that's awesome too. That's great.
Yeah, for those exact reasons. So this is the default run command. So again, if you need to know where these commands are, you go into package.json, into scripts, and any of these you can do npm run dev, and you'll see that, when I do npm run dev, it's running Vite. If I do npm run build, it's running a type check and then Vite build. So we can see if we do npm run test unit, it's running Vtest.
Nice.
So this is where you go if you don't forget or you don't remember, and then you can also create your own scripts here, depending on if you want to add like a coverage test and stuff like that. That's where you would add those scripts. Okay, so we'll do npm run test unit. We only have one file, so it should be pretty quick, and we failed. Nice.
And what was the failure?
The failure is because we're using a Pinya store, and
oh my goodness.
Because so this is the fun of testing, is because we're not in a Vue like
so this is like vanilla.
We're not like in Vue, quote unquote, right now.
Yeah, okay.
So there's no Pinya, because for Vue, we're creating Pinya and then calling app.use on it to associate it with Vue. But this test doesn't have that association. So the very first thing we're going to need to do. Yeah.
Can I explain this real quick? So basically what's happening is the code is running straight, or JavaScript is trying to execute this, but Vue is not loaded. Would you say that's a fair statement? Vue is not loaded in the, okay. Cool.
There's no Vue instance mounted anywhere. So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't work. We can get around that though. So we can use we can basically give each test its own Pinya instance.
Okay.
So we can use before each, and this goes inside the describe block. And just like in Java, where there's the annotations before each, before all, and so on, this works the same way. Where we have a before each function, we pass it in a callback, and before every test, this code will be executed.
Nice.
So what we can do is we can create what's called a testing Pinya.
Okay.
And I actually don't think it knows I have this because I haven't run npm install on this.
So you have to download a special library to make a testing pinya?
The testing pinya is under pinya testing. Actually, maybe I just need to import it.
Okay.
But yeah. So you do need to install a dependency.
Gotcha.
That doesn't come with the sort of bootstrapped version of Vue. So what did I say? Create testing pinya, and that's from @pinya/testing. There we go. And because of the way vtest is set up, we also need to pass in a spy. We need to tell it what to use to create a spy. Oh, sorry, that should be an option. And this comes from vtest. So when you see this v.fn, this is a spy function. So this is a sort of a, this would be roughly equivalent to saying like mockito.mock, and then like pass in a class. This is basically just mocking some function. And Pinya needs this to, because this is sort of outside, this is getting really deep into it, but basically the way vtest is set up, Pinya needs this explicitly declared.
Okay.
And then what we can do.
It needs the function, or it needs create spy to be declared, and that's why you're giving it like a fake value or fake.
Yeah.
I
think it'll tell us.
I mean, this is boilerplate stuff. You just got to get used to it.
Yeah, it says it actually tells you must configure the create spy option.
I see. That's why.
So now if we do that, okay. So now our test is running. So that's all we need to do. We need to create a testing pinya, and it has this function set active pinya, which basically does some magic and mounts it to the tests.
Cool.
Or provides it to the test. Maybe it would be better to say. So so now these tests all have that pinya instance.
Is there anything else you have to install for Vue, or is it you just have to create this mock? Is this only for stores that you have to worry about this?
For store testing.
For store testing only, but for components or anything else, is there any extra stuff you got to install for that?
No. So for components, it's Vue test utils, which comes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Vue test utils, which comes with the bootstrap.
Awesome.
So this is the only one, and it's installed like this. So npm install -d for the dev dependency, and then this is the library.
Awesome. Cool.
Okay, so now our test is running, but you'll see that it's expecting the length to be
2,
but it's actually 0.
Yes.
And this is for exactly what we just demonstrated. And just to further clarify what's happening, we can say, console.log. Well, maybe it's more appropriate to put it here.
This is gonna blow your guys' minds. Okay, yeah, do that, please. This is gonna be awesome.
So when I hit save now, you see I'm gonna print out an array of 4. So this is crazy, right? We're expecting it to be a size 2. We're getting size 0. And we're actually, it actually is returning a response of size 4. So why is that happening? Well, we already kind of alluded to it. It's because GetScripts is an asynchronous function. So what's happening is GetScripts is, there aren't threads in JavaScript, but it's kind of calling this and then saying, well, I'm not going to wait for this to return. I'm just going to execute, the expect. And then so maybe expect gets called and then GetScripts resolves, right? So we don't have the data. So what we need to do is simply await GetScripts, and because we're awaiting it, we need to make this into an async function itself. And now if I hit save, well, it still not
fails,
2.
But it's not 2, it's 4 now. So now it actually waited for the response. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
Chris.
now,
I'm getting all geeked up here,
right.
so I gotta chill out. Go for it.
Now if we change it to 4, we're passing. Now, the problem though is, again, we're using dummy data from our service. So if this were a real app, we would actually be calling a backend. And when we go to run these tests in, say, GitHub Actions, where there's no backend, they're just going to fail. They're all going to fail. So we want these tests to be able to run without a backend. So the way we do that, much like we did in the backend testing that Jerry showed us, is we mock our service. So how do we do that? So first things first about mocking, and this, I didn't get, I'm ashamed to say I didn't get this right away. So hopefully this is useful. We can only mock things. So we have this function use script menu, right? And this is a bit of a black box, and it's only exposing these things. So we can easily test these things because they're exposed and we can get at them. Script service, however, is kind of deeply inside what we're trying to test.
How are you going to do this?
How are we going to do this? The thing is, because we're importing script service, we can intercept the import and use that to inject a script service of our own. But what needs to be understood is that the only reason we can change this is because we're importing it from somewhere else.
Gotcha.
If script service, if this was some other function, right? So like if this were some other function here,
inside
we can't
of there.
mock. Yeah, we can't if we had a create script function, we can't mock this function because it is innate to what we're testing. But if it were imported from some other place, we can intercept the import and mock it. So that's an important thing to understand.
So basically, we are, instead of, I see we're the captain now, that one movie, but like the import script service thinks that it's actually getting a real script service. We're going to replace that real script service coming in with our own fake script service, and the composable is going to be none the wiser, basically.
Yes, exactly.
And how the heck are you going to do that? Okay.
Much like we've already done that with the Pina, actually, right? So we're, well, that's not actually strictly true. We're giving it a different Pina environment, but it's actually the same use auth store Pina. So that's never mind me on that. Okay. So how are we going to do this? We need two different things. First off, above our describe. So this would get hoisted anyways. So that's why we're going to create it at the top of the file. We're going to do v.mock. And we're going to pass it the path of the import.
That's so cool. V just lets you intercept it like that, easy.
Yeah. So this will intercept it and create a stubbed script service. So
it's a Jasmine spy object basically already.
Yeah, it's like equivalent to it. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool.
So.
Oh, wait up. So this is not Jasmine the spy. Do you know if the spy is a Jasmine thing or not?
There are spies that V uses. I'm not sure. I haven't used Jasmine.
You don't know? Okay. Sorry.
But I'm sure that the idea of spies is,
right. It'll be very similar.
Probably universal. Right. So what this will do again is this is taking our script service is what, like script service dot get scripts. So it's making this a stub, which basically when you call this, it'll just return probably like null or undefined or something. Like, you can call it, but it won't do anything. So what we want it to actually return some stuff so we can verify that, when this gets called, it's returning some stuff. And then assuming the status is okay, we get this, it sets that stuff to scripts.value.
Yeah.
So now that we have this, we're intercepting it. Now we can come into our test. And we need to actually set this up a little bit first. So that's where I was doing this before. So I'm just going to create my own array of test scripts for testing.
Is there? Can you put that in the describe? Because I've noticed when you write tests and you have the const outside of the before each, if somebody ever changes a value inside of that const, then it'll propagate to the rest of the test too, which could cause some failures. Do you get what I'm saying? Like if there's a test that changes items. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay. You want it inside the actual test?
Yes. Yeah. It's just in the describe itself, or like in the before each. You know how you have it in the before each?
Yeah, we could.
So what it does, it'll.
I don't think it'll be in the same scope though. If we do it in the before each, we can try that.
Or what you can do is you can do let. You can do let. I'm sorry. You can do let test scripts on the outside, and then you can. Yeah. This one's been. This lesson's been learned with blood, guys. Okay. Awesome. I don't know why. I don't know why it's complaining.
I think we're just never
because
reading.
it's just never used it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. So now we can go. Oh, and I'll need one more thing. So we're going to do the same thing up here with a. This will be an Axios response of any.
Yeah, but you also want to. Typically, you always want to do it in the before each. You don't want to. I mean, you could do it for now, but like just you want to get in the habit of putting the before each because then you're always reinitializing it every time, and then you don't have to worry about state changing on you.
Yeah, absolutely right. Am I copying and pasting the right thing? Okay. So this is and maybe I'll just show you a trick actually. If you're not sure about what this should be, you can, and you don't have GitHub Copilot, you can mouse over this and it'll say it's missing the following property.
Oh yeah.
Do a quick. You can do a view problem. Oh, maybe. I think that actually trick might only work on like your own types.
No. I thought it should work on your types too. Or on the Axios.
I know, like if I have like a user, I can do something like this, and I can mouse over this, and I can say it's missing some properties. I can do quick fix, add missing properties, and it'll actually just like create all of them for you.
Yeah.
But
it didn't do that for.
It wasn't. No, it wasn't doing that.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. So I thought that was going to be a good one, but so I ended up using. I think I just Googled it, honestly, to see what a mock response contained.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you could actually run the project live and then look in your console log to see what the response actually was. And then you copy it and then you paste it in. Like, I've done that many times also. But, yeah.
Yeah, no, good tip. Yeah. All right. So we have our response, which is going to contain those test scripts. Mm-hmm. And now we can go into our test and we can use, it's very important that we do this mock before we use script menu. Otherwise the mock will not be, like placed in time, if that makes sense.
Right. Yes.
So we will do v.mocked. So this is a TypeScript only thing. If you didn't have if you weren't using TypeScript, I think it will actually let you do something like script service .get scripts .mock, like it's auto completing right now. But because we're using TypeScript, that's no good. So what we'll do is we'll do v.mock.
So weird.
Yeah, there's figuring this out was weird because you see all like the Stack Overflow threads. Yeah. And they're all different. And then it's like, what am I missing? Oh, I'm using TypeScript. So we can mock resolved value. And there are a few different options here because you can mock all sorts of different, functions. So you could use .mock returned value, which would be just like a normal function return. You could do mock implementation. So mock return value is basically just saying, hey, just mock whatever the function returns. Mock implementation actually lets you substitute in your own function. So you could create a different function, which is actually really helpful if, for example, you have a function which accepts a callback. Then you can use mock implementation to make sure that callback is called in the test.
So mock resolve value? So let me just translate what you said in my own words. So mock resolve value is for promises, right? Is that what you're getting at? Like. This is it, but then mock returned value is for a regular value that is not a promise, basically.
Yep. So there's mock return value.
So that's normal. Like that's you're for the most part you're going to use this all the time. The mock return value. It's just because we're calling the backend, or we're calling Axios, which returns a promise. Then you have to use resolve. Or what you can also do is you can do mock return value, and then you have to return a promise of. I don't know if do you know how to do that? Promise of, and then the value. Is there a promise of or
it's
new promise?
Promise resolve.
Oh, promise resolve. Is that it? Okay. So if you're calling the
backend,
backend, okay, great. Okay, great. So you can do it either way. You can do it like that, or the cleaner way is mock resolved value. But resolved value is implying that it's a promise that's coming back, and the data that's inside of that promise is that mock response.
Yes. And then you can also do mock rejected value. So that would be if you want to test, errors and stuff.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
So anyways, yeah, so that's what this is saying is when this is called, we're going to return our mock response, which is an Axios response. Okay. So now when we call this, we're getting, so we wrote it to be 4 because we were using the actual script service, but now it's actually 2 because we're using our test data.
Nice.
Now I can change the test back to 2. And we can see that we are passing now.
Good job.
All right. So I'm going to write 2 more tests unless we want to talk about something else.
Yes, I have a question. Can you test the template itself? Can you show us how to test the template itself, even though I do not recommend you do that?
Yes. Let me.
I mean, you can do this afterwards if you like, but you can continue with what you were going to do. But I think it'd be very interesting to see how you would actually test the template also.
Yeah, we can get into that now. This will be a very basic sort of thing. So this template, you're still going to have to contend with get scripts being called every time.
Yeah.
So let's start trying to test this. So this will be, again, the same file name. Oh, well, the same start of the file name anyways, and then we'll just use .spec.ts. And so we'll do a describe. And make sure you use the vtest import and not the node test import. So this will be our script menu.view. All right, so let's see. Let's first just test that it mounts. So this will be like the, baby's first component test. And we'll just like test that maybe we have a H2 with a class of heading, everything rendered, we're happy with it. So here we're going to use what's called Vue test utils. This is another thing that makes testing on the front end a little tricky is that you have to figure out like what am I using at any given time, right? So this wrapper is vtest. The testing is vtest, but to test a component, we're going to need to use Vue test utils, which gives us a function called mount. So we can say wrapper equals mount. And again, it's not going to give me that import for whatever reason.
So translation here, you have to load the component in Vue basically, or you got to load the Vue component using the Vue framework. And I'm assuming that's what this does?
Yes.
Cool.
So it gives us sort of a virtual DOM to mount the component into.
Awesome.
So
a virtual DOM to mount the component into. That's great. I like that.
And our component that we're testing is script menu. So are you going to help me import that? Yes.
Great. Okay, cool.
Okay, so that's fine. So this is the most like basic, the mount accepts a number of different configuration options, but this is the most basic version of it. And I believe we are going to get into some trouble here because we don't have that Pina instance. So it's going to yell at us. So we're going to have to end up mocking the Pina again.
Nice.
But for now, we'll just do this. So, right.
Expect wrapper to exist to be true. That's great. So so this is like my personal preference, but I actually prefer to equal. Do you see to equal? Is there a to equal instead of to be?
There's equals. So
equals. Okay, cool.
Equals tests for value and
yes, exactly.
to be tests for identity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So 2B test like the memory address. It's the correct. They're the same objects. I prefer the 2 equals because you're evaluating the values themselves. Because you might end up with 2 objects that are to have the same values, but they're different, and then your test might fail from there. But that's just personal preference.
Yeah,
I mean,
I use 2B on literal values. Or,
gotcha.
primitives, right?
Yeah, primitives, right?
Yeah, and then you should use equals on objects or arrays or stuff like that.
Cool.
So just to show you how the wrapper works. So wrapper, we have certain methods we can use like .find. So this will accept a CSS selector. So we could do like .find .heading, and this will try and find this h2, and then we can just say .exists.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
Now, if I run this, this is probably going to give us a Pina error. So it's indirectly giving us a Pina error because user.name is derived from the Pina store.
Nice.
In the use script menu. So, all right, let me see if I can. Oh, I have it right here on this other screen. What a great.
Yeah, there you go.
What a great day. Okay.
Control C.
So, yeah, exactly. So the mount accepts an object of options.
Cool.
So you can do a lot of stuff here. So mount will attempt to fully mount this component along with all children. So that's important to note. Sometimes you don't want to mount all the children because you only want to test this component and not, maybe it's deeply nested with children.
Yeah.
So you can either call shallow mount, which will just mount this component and stub all of the children.
Nice.
Sometimes, though, for example, our team was using Prime View, so we do want to get the full component for certain of the Prime View components. For example, like an input text, right? We want to actually get the input so we can test the input. So what you can do is you can do mount, and you can pass it a I don't have that in front of me right now, unfortunately, but you can basically like tell it to shallow mount and then exclude certain components from the shallow mounting. So
cool.
basically force it to fully mount some components, which is really handy.
Gotcha.
But anyways, right here, what we're going to do is we're going to inject our testing Pina. So we're going to say global. And there's the stubs option, but we're going to use plugins. And this will be create testing Pina. And again, we will have to do that create.
Create the spy. Yeah. Okay. And then where do you return the name? You have to define that outside?
You mean
user.name.
The auth store? What's going to happen? You're saying to like mock it, I guess.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So right now I'm not mocking it. Right now we're giving it the Pina, like a Pina environment to use, and it's actually going to use the real store.
Oh.
Cool. If we wanted to mock the store, I would have to look at. That's not something I know off.
That's okay. It's okay.
It is possible.
So you're using the real store here. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we're fully mounting, and sometimes you might want to. If it's a store that actually affects the behavior of your component, it's not doing any database calls. Like sometimes you do want to use the full store.
Oh yeah. Totally.
But yeah.
I mean, the more mocking you add, the further away you're going away from the real behavior, right? Like you can mock it and you're isolating your logic and that's all cool. But what if you're wrong in your mocking of the behavior? Then your test is worthless basically at that point. Or not worthless, but it's erroneous at that point. So cool. Okay. So, that's awesome.
Let's make one more test. So I'm going to make a test and I am going to test that if I click the toggle sort button, I expect that it will toggle the sort direction.
Nice.
So let's see if we can test that. So we should say it should toggle the sort direction. So again, I'm going to use the same mount. I'll still give it the testing Pina just so it can exist. And so before I do an expect here, what I just want to show is how I like go about testing and troubleshooting testing and stuff. So we can do. So we'll call this the sort button. Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you. So we'll do wrapper.find. That's not what I called it though.
And then is there a click you can do on this?
There is, yeah. But I was just going to show that I want to be able to look at what this button looks like. This is really helpful because sometimes it stubs some of the stuff. So it's really helpful to do this sometimes just to troubleshoot your tests and see does this button exist on the page? Sometimes things won't mount when you expect them to, and so this is how I'll troubleshoot that. Is just kind of you can just do sort button.html or wrapper.find.html, and you can kind of see what's going on. And sometimes it'll reveal that I thought it had some other attribute on it, but because it was partially stubbed, it doesn't, or
right,
stuff like that. So
that's all. Because you might have shallow mounted it, right? And it might have
exactly, yeah. So you might have to select it a different way or interact with it a different way, or realize that you need to fully mount it.
Exactly. Gotcha.
Okay, so if we want to click the button, so we need to decide two things. How are we going to test that the button was clicked, and how are we going to click the button? So first things first, I can look in here and say, okay, well, I want to find the text, and let's see. I know the variable name is not good anymore. Okay, so we can see if we just call .text, we get the up arrow. So
nice.
I'll just keep that there for a moment. So let's figure out how to click. Because clicking is an asynchronous action, we need to await a click. So I'm going to say that exactly. Wrapper.find. So I select the element and I trigger a click on the element.
Can you replace wrapper.find with sort button so that people can see that you can still use that? Oh, there you go. Yeah. This is great. Look at that. So you can use sort button.trigger click, and you just simulated a button click.
What I'll do is I'll do sort button.text.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, good idea.
Just to show what's going on. So now we expect that. So we have the initial state pointing upwards. We click the button, and then we have the buttons pointing downwards.
That's sweet.
Now we're seeing what we're going to test. So let's outline that test now. So I will expect the initial state of the sort button to be the opposite of what that is. Oops. And then we will expect. Okay, so we're just going to switch these tests.
How did that happen? That's awesome.
GitHub Copilot is pretty clever, but sometimes not the most clever. And sometimes more clever than me. Okay. So now we have a test that says that, okay, well, if I click the button, we toggle the sort direction. So
that's great.
So yeah, that's how you can test. And so when you run npm run test unit, it'll by default enter this watch mode, which is really handy because whenever I save, it reruns the tests on just the files that I'm interested in, which is just really nice when you're rapidly iterating on a test. To not have to rerun the whole suite or something. It's really fast.
And then, one of the things that I tell everybody is that with HTML, basically, if you want to create you want to be able to write a CRUD app from scratch. So every CRUD app has a table with rows, and then there's always some sort of edit form. So do you know how to get the data from an input box? Is it the same way? Can you just do
yeah, I think it's
input?
We can simulate that.
Is it trigger? Is there multiple? I guess there's multiple triggers.
Yeah. It's any event. It's any event that you want, basically.
Yeah, I think trigger works on any event. But this actually has its own method to I think it's called setText, but we'll figure it out in a second. So we have an input. I gave it the class of input. So let's just create a new test here.
And I'm assuming that you can put that const wrapper inside of the before each so that you don't have to keep repeating it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You could do that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you don't have to do that right now, but
you'd have to do it in the same way we did before, where you have that wrapper above. But yes, yeah, you could do that.
Cool.
Okay, yeah. So let's first select. We'll say const input equals input, and then we'll just we'll see if we can. Oh, here we go. Input.setValue. Is it set value or set? Yeah, it is set value.
Cool.
So
do we need an
should be able
await
to
for it?
say, good question. It is yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I don't know how Vue test utils does it under the hood, but I guess.
Yeah, I guess it does. It's an event, I guess, because you're putting somebody's typing in test in the input. It's
Yeah.
cool. Or at least I guess in this case they're pasting it in.
I think it
so
has to be
fast.
because I think it triggers input events.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah. So if you had, like a input event listener, a change event listener, or something like that. Okay, so let's again confirm that input dot text is empty here, and then
That's so cool. That's so consistent.
Oh, I screwed it up somehow.
Oh, never mind. It's not consistent. So is it like input dot value?
Hold on. Yeah, it probably is because I did. Hold on. Let's see what. First off, let's see that we're selecting the right thing. We are. Let's see. It's probably input dot.
I mean, input dot text. It looks like it has one, but that's weird.
It does have a text.
And then it has set value, but what? No get value. Oh, is it input dot get? What?
No. That's a function which accepts an argument. I wonder if it's like.
That would be so dumb. I would not be happy with that. Is that what it is?
Yeah, let me Google really quick. So we'll say what? Vue test utils.
Yeah, that's the thing the reason I asked you for the input box is because I've noticed that with the UI elements, sometimes they're not consistent. Like one of them's text, one of them's value. What is it? So what is it?
Well, you actually need to get the underlying element and then just access the value, which it's not happy about. Let's see if it's actually. It might be right. It might just be a type issue. It is a type issue. So to get around this, you'd say, well, I know this is an HTML input element, and now it's
gotcha.
All right.
So you got to get the underlying element, and then you can get the value.
Yeah.
Dang. UI, man. Vue, they try to make it really nice and smooth, and they were doing it for the most part, but then you run into these little weird things.
Yeah.
You got to remember.
Okay, so now our test should be good.
Cool.
And just to prove it fails. Cool. And awesome. I guess normally you wouldn't be testing this necessarily. You'd be testing some sort of side effect of,
yeah.
But yeah, it's still good to know.
Well, so you don't typically want to test the UI components unless, because you said earlier that you have your base components, which are your junk drawer components. They're like your generic components that you use all the time. I would say in those cases, yes, you want to test those things because they're going to be used a lot. But when you get to like the more complicated pages, it's just it's just too much to try to test all that UI stuff.
Yeah, I think in the real world, like having Cypress tests on those is going to do way more.
Yes. Yeah.
To make you confident that your app is working right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then if somebody changes the color, it's not going to break your test.
Yeah.
That's cool. What else you got? You got anything else? There was like 2 other tests.
Well, I mean, I was going to write more just tests for the other one.
Okay, let's see. Does anybody have any questions? This is great, Chris. This is very helpful.
I was going to show you how to test the. There are a number of variations, but so I was going to test the Pina part of the.
Okay, let's do it.
Menu. So we're going to say it should return the username. So if you recall, we're getting the username from the auth store, but that might actually require us again to query a backend and get a user. So in my test, I don't actually want that to happen. So I was just going to show how to mock, use auth store returning a value.
Okay.
That way we can make sure that I guess here I'm returning just the user object directly. How was I doing it over here?
But I thought you were using the real one, right? Or I'm getting confused here.
Yeah, in my prepared thing, I actually made a computed for the username.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
Because here I'm exposing the whole user. So I guess in that spirit, I made a computed that just exposes the username from the user.
Okay, great. Let's do that.
So this is going to break.
Well, you can still put a user too, right? You just want to test the username.
Yeah, this is just going to force this not to mount. So let me just switch this really quick.
Okay, cool. I see what you're doing.
Now we're happy. Yeah, I mean, if we were going to use other parts of the user, that might make sense.
Gotcha.
I guess just for this test, yeah. So what we'll do here is, where am I? So what I can do is because we can take advantage of the fact that auth stores are, or that stores are singletons, and we can actually call the auth store here before we call our use script menu, and we can alter the auth store like in preparation. Cool. So we can directly say auth store.user, and oh, I'm sorry, we're yeah, it's the user, and say.
This is great. So this is how you test the computer property. You modify the auth store yourself, and then from here you can determine what the username is going to be, and what is the username. How do you? The username is equal to user.value.name. What is user.value? Oh, it's Fred. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so now we can say expect username.value to be Fred. And that passes.
Nice. Okay. But that's not. Oh, you use, yeah, because you ran use script on line 62. You're actually testing it. You call use script menu and you're extracting the username from line 35 on the right. And then from there, you're testing to see it's Fred. But my question is, how did you, on the right, it says on line, oh, okay, so line 8, this is where it's confusing me. So line 8, it says const user equals store to refs use auth store. So the user is wrapped by the reference. But on the left, you just did auth store.user equals some object. You didn't have to wrap it in a reference. Or you didn't even have to use .value on line 56.
Correct.
Is that?
That is a Pina oddity.
Shortcut, right? Or like, yeah, okay.
Again, because remember, if I don't have store to refs here,
yeah, it'll
user isn't wrapped in a ref, which is why exactly. I can do this.
Yeah.
So I need to, it's a goofiness of how Pina works.
Is ref shorthand for reference point?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
okay. Oh man, this is basically call Chris. Like I can't get my reference to work. Shoot, call Chris. Like that's. Oh my gosh, this is so confusing.
It took me a long time to. The problem is like you get a few tests working and you feel good, and then you have a new component that uses some other third party something, and then you have to figure out how to mock that, and interact with that, and it's all just. I would say there's like 5 or 6 different like scenarios that you need to learn how to test, and they're all a little different.
But you know what, though? Once you learn all 5 or 6 of them, then you become so much better, so much more comfortable, and then you get to start ripping these tests out, which is awesome. Oh, this is cool, man. I still got to wrap my head around the whole store to refs use auth store. So when you use the auth store and you want to pull the user out from the auth store, you got to run store to refs to make sure that you don't decouple or you don't get like a broken. To make sure that when you update the user, it'll update the rest of the composable. It'll update any other component, right? Okay.
Yeah, you need to do that to allow it to retain its reactivity.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, allow it to retain its reactivity. I like that. Allow it to retain its reactivity. So for you guys that don't know what I'm talking or what we're talking about, like reactivity is the way because of the UI is so because the UI is like so entrenched with asynchronous coding. So basically, like whenever you click a button, it has to trigger something else, and whenever you like type into an input box, it can trigger something else. Because of that whole triggering mechanism, these frameworks try to make it easy for you to code using that. And one of the things that they're doing here is that if a variable value changes, it starts triggering stuff for you. It'll recalculate numbers for you so that you don't have to worry about going back and making sure that everything calculates. So for instance, in this case, like if somebody changed, let's say somebody renamed their, instead of doing Fred, they did FRED. They renamed themselves from Fred to FRE, and they typed FREDD in their profile. That would then update the user object, which would then propagate to all the different places. And then the username would then become FREDD instead of Fred. So that's how that works. So when we say reactivity, that's what we mean. It's that special ability for it to trigger other events. But like what Chris was saying is when you remove the store to refs, or if you don't get the object from the auth store with the store to refs method, it breaks that reactivity, and then it just becomes a regular variable at that point.
It's a regular variable that's detached from.
Yeah, it's detached. It doesn't trigger. It doesn't trigger any more stuff.
Another place that you need to be careful with that is when you're using the Vue router, and you're using so in composition API you would do something like const route equals use route.
Okay.
So this gives you what would be like that in the options API something that looks like the magic $ route.
Yeah.
So now we can do something like route.params.id.
Cool.
So something to be aware of is that this is not a reactive value. So if you have a site structure where it's possible, like you can get from like one route to the same route but with a different ID, your route won't update if you just rely on this. So you need to wrap this in a watch.
Jeez Louise.
So what watch will do is it accepts a first argument, which could be this route.params.id as an anonymous function, and it'll watch that value. And then it has a second argument, which will be a callback, which is basically like what, this is a little ugly, like what will happen. I like that either. What will happen, and we can say this will be the ID. So this will be this value is the first argument, and you can actually have like the I think it's like this, new value, old value, if you want to compare them or something. But we could just have this, and then we could do something if the route changes, and that's how you handle that. So that's something to be aware of. That tripped me up in a past project. And and the thing you want to do is this will only execute if this changes. And for some reason, when it's set the first time, it doesn't count as changing.
It doesn't execute it.
So you need to give it an option immediate true. So that means when you first load into the route, it'll execute whatever code, and also whenever this changes.
That is hilarious. That's another gold nugget right there.
Immediate true means that you run it no matter what the first time.
Yes, happens. Correct. And that's going to break everything.
Hopefully you don't have to see that until you're very deep into a project. But this is That's one of those snippets that are like gold if you ever come across it. That's awesome.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Does anyone have any questions?
I can't find my clap button, so I'm clapping for real. This is great, man. This is awesome. No other questions?
No questions, but thank you very much for putting this together and demonstrating a whole lot of front-end testing. I feel like you just saved me about 70 hours of research.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you multiply that by 10. That is so many hours. Yeah, that's...
You should have seen all the tabs I had open when I was learning this stuff. It's just, it was a mess.
You've given us our lives back.